Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be talking about my favorite effect of all time. I'm talking about the fuzz pedal. Unfortunately, it has a few conditions and tips to make or break your tone. But don't worry, today I'll be giving you all these tips and secrets to make it work for you and to get an amazing fuzz guitar tone. So this video is based on my personal experience and some research I have done on people like Jimmy Page, Billy Gibbons, Eric Clapton, etc. Throughout the years, what guitars they have used, with which amps and which types of fuzzes. And I have noticed some patterns and similarities that I would like to share with you in this video. So without further ado, let's quickly go through the four main types of fuzz pedals. I will not go through all the technical details and the topologies and differences between all of these. One of the good videos I have seen by JHS, Josh Scott. JHS is basically a pedal company, so Josh Scott, the owner, has made a video explaining the differences between fuzz pedals in more details. So I would recommend you watch that video first. The link is in the description. So this video is more about the application rather than the technical differences. So the first type of fuzz is the fuzz face. To me, it is the tamest, very soft, hitting fuzz. I think it's perfect for someone who really does not have experience with fuzz to first go with the fuzz face. The second type is the tone bender. Now the tone bender has more distortion, I feel, than the fuzz face, but it's actually more diverse. You can get something very tame to something very distorted, which makes it my personal favorite. The third one is the Octavio. Now, it's not as popular as the other ones on this list. However, it is unique and it has its own characteristics. One of those characteristics is that it typically has an octave sound or octave effect with it. Last but not least is the big muff. Now unfortunately I don't have a big muff, so I couldn't demo it in this video. However, if you want to hear it, it's basically that big fuzzy wall of sound that you hear in more modern fuzz tones. Think about Sonic Youth or Weezer or that kind of tone. That's the big muff mostly. Now let's talk a little bit about the type of guitar pickups, because this is a big important factor on getting a good fuzz sound. Now if you notice when you watch any demo for a fuzz pedal, you will most likely see people using a Tele or a Strat or any single coil pickup guitar. It's not a coincidence. There is a reason for that. Typically fuzz pedals work better with single coil pickups. So many people who use humbuckers, it's not always going to be the best sound, but some fuzz pedals like humbuckers, but all fuzz pedals actually like single coils. We'll talk about that in more details in this video. We'll also talk about the type of amps and what combinations would work best for you. But now let's focus on you. What type of tone you're looking for? Are you looking for a tone that's mostly fuzzy? You're talking about a big wall of fuzz sound. Or are you looking for something that is mostly overdriven / distorted with natural like tube amp distortion, and you want the fuzz to be just a part of it but not the majority of the sound. So if you predominantly want the fuzz sound, here is what you can do. So typically you will need to run your fuzz into a clean amp. Now just go to the clean channel of any amp, or if you just have one channel, just don't use any overdrive pedals or anything to make it distort. Just use it on the clean setting. So for this application, a clean amp is better. So if you are using the clean amp, so what kind of guitar or what kind of pickups should you be using? So if you have single coil pickups like a Strat or a Tele or whatever, don't worry. Any type of fuzz pedal would do the trick. Just crank that fuzz into a clean amp using your single coil pickups and you are good. However, if you are using humbuckers, unfortunately it's not going to be as easy to get that sound. So if you are using a Fuzz Face, it's going to be very biasy, it's going to sound muffled but not in a good way necessarily. Same with the Octavio. The tone bender will handle that a little bit better, and definitely the big muff will handle it even much better. Now let's talk about the second scenario, which I think is the most popular or the most used fuzz sound. We're talking about that 60s and 70s fuzz tone. Think about Jimi Hendrix cranking the Marshall amp and using the fuzz just to give it a boost. You're not really predominantly using the fuzz, although when you hear it you might think it is. But take a step back, listen to something more modern, and you'll realize, oh, there is a difference. There's a very fuzzy sound, and there is an overdriven / distorted sound that has a flavor of fuzz. So for this sound, how to achieve it? Well, if you're using a tube amp, crank that amp or use an attenuator or use an overdrive pedal in front of it. You want some edge of breakup, slightly overdriven sound coming from your amp. Now, generally speaking, if you want that kind of sound, use a Fuzz Face or a tone bender or an Octavio, but avoid using a big muff. A big muff is very distorted and it might overtake the sound, not in a very pleasant way. Think about how when you put multiple distortion pedals with high gain next to each other, the kind of mess or how out of hand it would be for the sound. So big muff is not something I would recommend for this application. Now let's take a step back and talk about the guitars. Now yes, these three pedals, the Fuzz Face, the tone bender and Octavia, work for this application. However, if you're using humbuckers, I would recommend only using the tone bender. Octavio might work in some situations, but it's not ideal. Tone benders, they work generally better. Fuzz Faces, not as much. But with single coils, it will work all the time with any combination. Now, one thing to bear in mind. Now, if you use a combination that I did not recommend and you get something awesome, then that's fine. You can always tweak things around. Nowadays, there are so many types of fuzzes and hybrids between multiple types and more modern fuzz circuits that can give you multiple results for multiple uses regardless of the type of pickups or the amp that you're using. This video is more towards just general guidelines for these typical old school, vintage, original fuzz circuits. Now we have talked about the combinations between your guitar, the kind of fuzz you're going for, and the amp, and which ones go well together. But now let's talk about general things that you have to know when you're using fuzz. Fuzz pedals are very primitive. They must go first in your signal chain. Now when it comes to your tone bender or your Fuzz Face, they must go first in the signal chain. Yes, before the tuner, before the wah, before anything. So that is a must, because if they don't respond well to pedals coming in front of them, so you will get not a very good sound out of that. From my experience, Octavio also has that issue, but not always. So Octavio is always in that gray area. Big muffs, you can place them anywhere, you're good with that. Now, one problem that so many people don't know how to deal with is they want to use wah pedals, and wah pedals typically come before overdrive and distortion pedals and fuzzes. Now, one thing about wah pedals is that they have to go after fuzzes. I'm talking about tone benders and fuzz faces, of course, but you know, what if you really don't like the sound of the wah being placed after the fuzz pedal? In that scenario, I would say try to use some sort of an overdrive pedal after the wah pedal, or maybe a cranked amp, because the wah sweeps will sound better and sweeter and more balanced, because it is in the middle of overdrive and fuzz and not just after everything. So that's one tip I would recommend. Another thing to be aware of is if you're using another circuit or another pedal that is sensitive to its placement, that should be placed first. For example, some range master treble boosters would have that issue. In my experience, keep the fuzz first, because I feel like even if it doesn't sound that great, if treble boosters were second in the signal chain, they would still not really be as bad as putting the fuzz second. So I hope this helps. I hope I have covered all your questions or all the scenarios you can think about. If I have missed anything, please let me know in the comment section below. And make sure you like, subscribe, and please share this video on your favorite gear page thread.